Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Uh, we are very excited to have such a big response and so much of interest in a topic that's not so well addressed, about a group that's not so very well known. Many of us receive information through our eyes and through our ears, whether it's from the TV, whether it's through conversations with our neighbors, looking at our mobile phone, walking on the beach or on a city street. Information is available to us constantly, and our world is organized, our world is designed for a sighted and a hearing person. But this presents many barriers to a person who is deafblind. June is celebrated as the Deafblind Awareness Month because it marks the birth month of Helen Keller, who is unquestionably the most famous person who was deafblind. Helen Keller's journey is inspiring. It's a great story. It took her from being an isolated person with a very limited life and very limited social circle at home to one that's rich in experiences. All thanks to Anne Sullivan, who was her first teacher and who chose to stay beside her to serve her as her access provider and her communication partner through much of her life. Most of us have heard of Helen Keller, but few know about the many people in our own country, in our city, in our towns, maybe even in our neighborhood. Through this month, we raise awareness among different people in different organizations so that all of you can come to know what a rich and enjoyable life is possible if we can remove barriers. People can think of ways to reach out. People can learn how to respond or to be helpful. People can learn a way of communication and interaction so that they can develop friendships with people like Zamir, who are deafblind, and through them experience a view of the world that's profoundly new and honestly quite fantastic. Today, this meeting is really about building a community that is more aware. And this is a big part of our work at Jyothna Trust. We raise awareness of the barriers that people with disabilities face, as well as the ways in which we, you and I, who may not necessarily be trained or have some great expertise, how can we as a community enable change? You are in for a big treat today. Please join me in welcoming Zamir Khale, a deafblind person, founder of the Society for the Empowerment of the Deafblind, SEDB, the very first organization created by people who are deafblind, for people who are deafblind, aiming to empower deaf and deafblind people with better education, training, assistive technology, employment opportunities. SEDB advocates for their rights and fights against discrimination against people with disabilities in this country. Beside him, you see Amresh Gopalakrishnan. We are very lucky to have him with us. Amresh belongs to this unique and special category of people we call CODA, or CODA, short for Child of Deaf Adults. He is a professional sign language interpreter and a special educator for the deaf. He has authored and co-authored 5 sign language dictionaries and currently runs a sign language content production firm called Let's Sign. A longtime friend and colleague of Zamir Kali, Amresh is using tactile interpretation to convey in sign language to Zamir in a way that he is able to perceive. We are also very pleased and privileged to have with us Professor Srilata, a poet, writer, Professor of English at IIT Madras. She's currently working on a multi-genre book on disability that incorporates perspectives from people with disabilities, parents, caregivers, and special educators. I've been part of this journey and really look forward to seeing what she comes up with. Before we begin this event, I'd like to acknowledge the generosity of Vidyasagar in allowing us to use their platform and extend a special big thank you to their webinar team who have given us huge support and patiently given us this support even in the midst of their own events. With this, I'd like to hand over the rest of this hour's session. Thank you again, Srilata, for accepting to take this on. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Namita. And good afternoon, good evening, all of you. I think this webinar is a very, it may be a small event, but in my understanding, it's a very significant event from, prior conversations with Namita, from having looked up Zamir Dale's journey up until now. And I find this whole thing not just fascinating as from a purely like quote unquote an outsider's point of view. I'm actually really grateful also to be allowed entry into this community even for like just one afternoon. So special thanks to you and to Chetana and to Vidyasagar also. Prior to the event, I think Namita had actually forwarded to me number of questions that participants who have registered for this event have that they would want to ask of Zamir. And some of those questions, are really questions that I myself also had. And there is a way in which I think we come at this from like a position of not knowing anything about or not knowing very much about this condition, except by assuming somehow, and I feel perhaps it's a wrong assumption, somehow by just assuming that this is a double handicap, right? And I was thinking about this and I said, maybe it is not just a double handicap, maybe it's another way of being and another way of sensing the world, and I would like to know just how. But anyway, so, so Zamir, these are some questions that some of the participants have had and which also I had. So I'll just begin with, I think what chronologically at least comes first in a manner of speaking, which is to ask you, what was your childhood like? If you could describe to us your childhood, your early years, how did you acquire language? How did you learn about the world? And what were some of the early first solutions that you remember having come up with to deal with a world that is so obviously set up for people without, people with hearing and with sight? So over to you, Zamir.
You're on mute, Amresh.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm so sorry. So shall we start again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have told you. Yes, I will. Yeah.
Okay. Once again, hi everyone, and thank you very much to Chetana Trust and Namita for organizing this webinar. And we are celebrating this month as a Deaf Blindness Awareness Month. And let me tell you a little bit about my childhood. When I was born deaf. I could see, but I had something which is known as Usher syndrome. And we lived in a village. And my parents did not know how to communicate with me because we were living in a village. And my grandfather and my grandmother, Okay, my grandfather was working in the army in Pune. So I shifted to Pune. We moved to Pune. My father and my mother, we moved off to Pune. And I was born in Pune, in fact. I lived with my grandparents. And it was very basic communication. It wasn't very great. My grandfather, my grandparents, they used a lot of speech and a lot of gestures to communicate with me. Slowly, I started using my vision by the age of 9. My parents my grandparents were taking care of me, and they used to put me in school and bring me back from school. So I studied in a deaf school in Pune. So I was a day scholar. So we traveled by bus, and I traveled by the school bus, in fact. And slowly I lost my vision, and I suffered a lot. I really wanted to see the world, but since my vision was slowly depreciating, I really felt sad. And by age 10, it was really difficult to see. And when I went to the hospital, they gave some medicines, and probably they didn't have much technology like how they used to have now. So it was big suffering at that point of time. I couldn't communicate, and I really suffered a lot. And I went back to my parents, and we were thinking of which school to put me in. So at that time, we heard of a school in Bombay, which is known as the Helen Keller Institute. So we met with Beroz Vacha, and I was admitted in the school. So Mrs. Beroz Vacha, she taught me a lot. She taught me so many things. She taught me tactile method and braille. And that's where I started to learn English. And there were a lot of new concepts which developed over there. And I also learned how to use speech therapy. And I learned American Sign Language. I learned how to write a little bit and do all normal things. So that's how I grew up, and I try to be as independent. And that's there are a lot of things that the teacher taught me, but at the same time, I also did a lot of things independently and slowly tried and got employment later on.
Yeah. Thank you, Zamir. So this leads me to this next question. You mentioned tactile communication, and I think Namita also brought it up in terms of what Amaresh does. But so there were a lot of people who had this question. When we meet a deafblind person, how does one communicate? Because somebody like me, for instance, who's new to all this, doesn't know sign language, doesn't know anything about this tactile communication. I find it very fascinating just watching it, and it just looks like I don't know, it just looks very beautiful and very gentle and lovely. But beyond that, there is an area of complete ignorance for me and for many of us, I guess, on this webinar. Right. So how does one go about equipping oneself? That's one thing. And also in terms of maybe technology or assistive devices, what are some of the other ways in which we can communicate with deafblind people and have them speak to us and speak back to them?
Okay. In case any person meets a deafblind person for the first time, for example, in school, when I was studying in school, we had a teacher who always was with us, who would interpret for us. So we had a lot of persons at that point of time who saw us communicating, and they wanted to know how to communicate with us. And we used to fight, like using tactile communication, we used to fight and all that. And people, when they saw, they were really wondering how it is possible and how they can understand the meanings. So how they can communicate and explain things. So usually parents will help to interpret. So I asked him how does one communicate for the first time if they meet a deafblind person. So he's saying that they could actually write on the palm of his hand the letters. They could write on his palm of his hand, so he can actually. So he's showing how to use that. So this is A and B. So he's writing down my name. So using this method, you can communicate with a deafblind person. In the year 1999, at school, I learned about different technologies that are available, which I've never seen before, experienced before. So I had a few deaf friends who were using these technologies, and some blind persons also, they were using this technology. So I wanted to learn them, and I joined the IT class. So at that point of time, I learned about Java software. At that point of time, I never knew about Braille display units. And slowly, I found that from America, they had produced a Braille display unit. It was like a godsend thing. And through that, we are able to communicate much more freely.
Yeah. My other question again is, how easy or difficult are day-to-day simple activities for you? For instance, taking the stairs, it may be, or putting together a meal, or just like picking up the phone. I mean, being able to communicate with your friends and so on, which of course we've spoken about a little bit already. How do you get around? And what would make all of these day-to-day activities easier? Is there, maybe a few things that you can focus on and talk about, which would make your life much easier and the lives of people like yourselves way easier?
The first thing is, if a deafblind person does not know how to use technology, it's going to be very difficult for him. So if a deafblind person does not know how to use technology, then it's going to be very difficult for him to communicate with other people. And secondly, when hearing people and other people, they see deafblind on the road or outside, if they have any barriers, that they hit upon any barriers, and they want to communicate with them, it becomes very difficult for them to communicate with us. Because they might not be aware of how to communicate with us. So using technology, communication becomes very easy, like for example, using WhatsApp. So that's connected to the Braille device, and you can just sit at home and use WhatsApp and communicate with other friends. And they share a lot of information and a lot of work. So I'm able to use my Facebook, and I'm able to use emails. So I read a lot of things and I share with my friends. So I also teach a lot of friends about different things that are happening in the world. So technology has really been very helpful. So if technology isn't available, then it's going to be very difficult for deafblind people to, carry on with life. Like deafblind people, there are people who live alone by themselves. They can cook, but very simple things like rice and tea and very simple things they can cook, but not very exotic things. They can go to the shop, but it's going to be very difficult. Some of the shopkeepers, they don't allow deafblind persons to enter the shops. Sometimes they shout at them and they push them away. So when those people see the deafblind person once, twice, and they get used to them, and then they are ready to help them, and they can communicate using this. They probably use pen and paper to communicate. For example, buying rice, 1 kilo of rice, and different groceries and provisions. So we try to use gestures, and if they don't understand, then I write it on the palm of their hands. So, for example, 1,200 rupees, then he writes on the palm of my hand, and then I take up the money and give it to him. And if we don't have change, then it becomes very difficult. So now, since the money currency has changed, it becomes very difficult for us to identify what kind of currency we are giving. So we keep asking the shopkeeper what currency this is, and probably the shopkeeper helps them to tell what denomination it is. So that's how we go on with life.
So actually, just kind of building on this response of yours, so there's this whole one way in which we tend to look at or think about any person with disability in terms of, oh yes, we should do our best, we should try and help them, right? So it's often, I think, most well-meaning hearing people or sighted people, that's perhaps how we would think about it. Right, so that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, from just looking up I think there was a YouTube video which Namita had shared with me earlier and other things. I also realized that you and many others in positions like yourself, what you perhaps value most of all is being independent, right? And somehow this framework of, okay, let me go and help that person, of course that has its own value, but I just wanted to ask, how important is it for you to be independent? What value does that hold, and how have you achieved this measure of independence that you obviously have, because you have now gone on to you actually set up this entire NGO and all of that. So could you tell us a little bit about that and its importance of being independent?
Previously, when I was working with SENS International India as an advocacy officer. So at that point of time, I learned a lot of things. Excuse me. I met a lot of people. I did a lot of presentations. I met with different NGOs and learned how they set up NGOs and how they set up schools and different things like that. And I've also seen a lot of deaf associations which have been set up, and different disability NGOs that they have set up. They have achieved a lot of things. But till now, they didn't have a separate deaf-blind NGO for the deaf-blind. So that was the reason I really thought about that, and I wanted to set it up. Usually what happens is other non-disabled people set up NGOs for disabled people, and they get a lot of funds and they do a lot of activities, but it's really not reaching the people. And they have their own development plans, and it really doesn't reach us, and really it's not helpful. So that's the reason why for the first time I plan to set up my NGO, the Society for Empowerment of Deafblind. So the aim of the NGO is to provide employment, try to be as equal as other people. So we would like to support the blind community and the deaf community as well. Like to support a lot of interpreters. So all this kind of work we would like to do. I also like to say that it's very important for a deafblind person to be independent. If you're not independent and we always depend on other people, and if you're not independent, so we cannot create a proper awareness. So we need to create proper awareness and show people that we can be independent and we can function in life. It is difficult to be independent because a lot of accessibility problems. For example, while walking on the roads aren't proper. If I use the cane and walk on the road, sometimes I miss the way and I probably take the wrong route. So I try to communicate with other people, show them the address. Some can read and some cannot. And I use the phone and try to connect with other person and get the address and show to the person, and probably they can help me to reach my destination. So things like this happens.
Yeah. One other question, which I think I had not probably shared with you all earlier, but I'm curious to know what role does family play in terms of, to what extent does it act as support system for deafblind people like yourselves? In your own case, how has it worked? And if you can also then tell us a little bit about, issues like marriage and setting up your own house and all of that, right? So there is a sense in which we understand disability in the public sphere, but how does it work in terms of domestic life, support from family, parents, spouses, and just tell us a little bit about that.
About the family, family members, they are not much aware, like when they have a child who is deaf or deafblind, they do not know how to communicate, they are not aware of it. And if they have siblings who are hearing and sighted, they give much support to the other siblings, but not to a deafblind child. The support is very less and there's a lot of discrimination. So if the deafblind person, goes up well in life, then the family members are happy. Sometimes even the siblings, they discriminate with the deafblind brothers or sisters. Sometimes when deafblind siblings see that the other siblings have got married and they have a very happy life, we also want to have such kind of life. So they like to be independent, and I know some of them who have got married, who have got employment, and they have a happy life. Some of them, not much. They have certain problems also.
Yeah, so this just a quick connected question for Zamir. Yeah, so a couple of things actually. I just see Namita's question also. One is that how important then are things like community and friendships for people with deaf blindness or people with disabilities. That's one, and then I'll quickly follow up with another question. Yeah.
We have different disabled communities, we have the deaf community and all that. For the deaf blind community, um, the deaf community can actually help us. So they can help us interpret, they can help us, advocate with the government. So the deafblind children, they advocate to become more independent and get more support services from the government. So the government should help them first in providing very good basic education and higher education and college education and things like that. So if they are able to provide, then we can get good employment and we can get, so we can have better accessibility and get insurance, medical insurance and things like that. So we need a lot of support from other communities also.
Okay, thank you. There were a couple more questions from participants. One is, how do you spend your leisure time, and what are some of the things that you like to do when you have spare time on your hands?
I read a lot of books. I read the news. I open the internet and I browse the internet. I get a lot of information and news. I check the WhatsApp. So I read a lot. And sometimes I play Ludo, some games on the internet. I play chess on the internet. So I practice to play how to play all these kind of games. So there are tactile methods, like to use how to play these kind of games. So I try and do all that.
Okay, so one participant had this question. When you lost your vision, you were very young, you were just a child. So how did you manage to stay positive? I mean, I think you spoke about how difficult it was, but how did you manage to stay positive? How did you survive it? And how did you find, where did you find that motivation from when there were so many problems that you faced?
So when I lost my sight, before that, I always was thinking about technical things, like I want to learn about different technology, like how the fan works and how the bicycle works. So I always used to, keep meddling with things and see how they work. At the time of age of 10, when I started losing my vision, so I was thinking like, if I'm a deafblind person, I should have positivity in my life and I have to try and do things by myself. So if other people have a negative perspective, that is their problem, but I need to have a positive perspective and try and develop as much as possible in life.
Yeah, so I see another question. The participant wants to know what can you use apart from tactile sign language? What are some of the other communications methods available, and also can deafblind people learn many languages?
Sorry, can you come again?
Can deafblind people learn many languages?
Some deafblind people, they communicate only through English. Some of them find it very difficult to learn English because they find it difficult to learn the grammar of the words. So some of them, for example, abstract concepts, they're not able to understand. For example, the word love and things like that, they are very abstract, so it's very difficult for us to understand these. Some of them misunderstand the meanings of certain words and they use the words not in a proper way. For example, the word lazy. Some deafblind people think that the word lazy means that it's very tiring. So I've always tried to tell them that the word lazy does not mean that it's very tiring. It means that you're being lazy and you don't want to do any kind of work. So things like that happen. And as far as different languages are concerned, so we have, in India, we have around 29 states and there are as many languages. But they have different kinds of variations in sign language also. Sometimes it is a little confusing when we use signs. So we usually use American Sign Language, just kind of standard, so that it's very easy for us to communicate.
Okay. So one question is, what is the message that you would like to give technology firms? For instance, there is in terms of phone-based payment or online education, which is now becoming very popular, are all these new ways and new technologies? Do they pose? Are they benefits or do they pose their own barriers to you?
Okay, yes, deafblind people need a lot of technological assistance. We need braille devices which are much cheaper, and we need a lot of better internet connectivity. So we have this CAPTCHA, which the government has asked to use. That's very difficult for us to access the CAPTCHA codes and all that. So we don't use much of social media like Twitter and all that. But Facebook is much better because we get better accessibility in Facebook. So Twitter, and other platforms like LinkedIn, it's not very accessible to us. The certain apps that have been developed in India, they have certain accessibility issues. So probably we can learn from Facebook on how to provide different accessibility. And like, like we can contact American firms and learn how to improve accessibility for all these kind of apps.
So we looks like we come full circle and back to the same question that more or less we began with, which is another participant wants to know, how can anybody like me communicate with Zamir when we do not know tactile language, right? And what would his solution be, and where do I even begin?
Okay. If anybody does not know tactile sign language, probably they can take a course on how to use tactile sign language. We can probably organize a course, a training course with Namita and everyone. So participants can actually take part in this course and learn. So we can teach sign language and explain about deafblind and other information. And once they get the confidence, they will be able to communicate. Even other interpreters, they find they don't have much confidence to communicate with deafblind people. So if a person does not know how to use tactile sign language, then maybe he can write on the palm of my hand by the letters, or probably use other communication devices like mobile phones or laptops and chat with me, so I can use the braille display and respond back. So that's how we can do.
Okay, can I ask, there are many more questions. So one question is, how well are libraries in India and schools able to provide resources that are helpful and meaningful to deaf-blind people? And also, sorry, related question, I think. Oh, okay, maybe you should carry on. Related question is about storybooks. How do you get them? Are they available to children today who are deafblind? Since we have so many writers and so on in the audience.
So accessing libraries are much difficult, but the National Association of the Blind, they have produced a lot of braille books which we can access. So if we have a technology where we have a pad kind of thing which can produce tactile descriptions or tactile images of how the storybooks are, then it will be much better for us, and it will improve our interest in reading. But they have to learn how to use these kind of tactile methods and the braille displays and all that. So if they learn it properly, then it will be much more useful. So, people like Pradeep and myself, we are really interested to read stories and novels. So we are trying to request the libraries to have more braille printed materials, so that can be helpful for us to read all these kind of novels.
Okay, so are there also tactile pictures in storybooks that they would enjoy?
Yes, there are a few new technological advancements through which we can actually feel the different artwork and the different pictures through tactile method.
Yeah. Does he have anything more to say to that? I'm saving the big question for the last, actually.
We have what is called the DAISY books. The DAISY books, which are for the blind people, they are speaking books for the blind. So these can be converted into using a speech recognition software, converted to text, and they can actually read it on the Braille device. Even for examinations, when we go for examination, we are requesting the government to have more of Braille devices in the examination, so it'd be much more easier for us. And even I've been advocating with the National Open Schooling System to have much more Braille books and materials. So I like to use the physical book, the Braille book, instead of using technology and Braille devices. So I like to use the Braille book, which has the Braille characters, so I can read with it, and that's more interesting for me. That feels good for me.
Yeah, so one big question I think many of us have, which yeah, we have just put off to the end actually, is in terms of in India, what kinds of how well equipped are we to deal with the needs of deafblind people, especially in terms of reasonable accommodations in education, schooling, also the big question of employment, right? So these are of course huge issues. Just wanted you to answer that.
In India, the government is actually not much aware of the accessibility issues for the deafblind. So we need a lot of interpreters who know tactile communication. So government is not aware of it, that's one thing. So in the recent Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016, so deafblindness has been included as one of the multi-disability categories. So they have a separate category for deaf and a separate category for blind. And they have 21 different disabilities that have been identified. The deafblind has been put under the multi-disability category. So we need a separate category for deafblind and increase the number of disabilities identified as 22 so that we can have better educational facilities, better domestic life, and better employment.
So there is a question from a person from Indonesia. And the question is, we have no adults who are deafblind like you. So it is hard to advocate. How do we even begin raising awareness on the rights of children who are deafblind so that at least this generation can have some hope?
So maybe we can communicate with, I can probably connect with Zamir, and I can probably think about ways how we can help. So initially, I was not into advocacy, and I was not, so independent. So when I saw my grandfather who was working in the army, he used to advocate a lot for me. So, like being with him, I experienced all that and I started advocating for myself. So that's how I learned how to advocate. So similarly, in that case, maybe we can connect with each other and maybe we can explore other ways on how to advocate and improve situation over there.
Okay, so there are okay, something more. Yeah. Can I ask? Yeah. So there are two more questions. One is, what has been your biggest challenge as someone who is deafblind? That is one. Related to that, is it a different set of challenges that women who are deafblind face?
About the biggest challenge in my life, for a deafblind person, when I lost my sight and I couldn't hear, how to live, that was the biggest challenge. If people don't help, then it's going to be a really bad life. And especially for women with deafblindness, the challenge is very great and they're really discriminated, their rights are not met. They're just locked up in homes, asked to do a lot of domestic work. Some of them have tried to communicate and connect with women deafblind, but their parents do not allow them and they do not support them. So that is the major challenges the women are facing because they are usually locked down at homes, and even they do not, get much development, not much awareness or things like that.
Okay, so I think we are almost out of time. If there is something else, then we can just quickly wrap up. Is there something else that Zamir would like to say in conclusion?
I want to thank all of you, all the participants who have joined and who have listened to me. So my message to all of you is to please advocate for deafblind people and support them as much as possible throughout the world. In fact, so you can find deafblind people in your community, and you can create your own ideas on how to communicate with them, use technology as much as possible, use assistive devices, any kind of support is really needed, and you can advocate with the government and try to help deafblind people to be more independent and have a very good network, and so that we can also be as equal to all of us as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for listening in. I think there's going to be a slide with resources that Teresa will be putting up. But I enjoyed the conversation hugely. So thank you, Zamir, and thank you, Amaresh. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. I think we are very well aware that we've not been able to address the whole range of questions that you've sent to us live. We will spend time trying to go back and look through to be able to identify things, especially requests for information, requests for resources. I'm going to ask Teresa to quickly project a slide that has some information and some immediate contact. SEDB is the Society for the Empowerment of the Deafblind. You can go to their website, you can contact them, and of course the Chetna website, where you can always write to us with any further questions that you may have. Very big thank you, Amaresh, for really being able to keep up. I think we battered you with questions. Thank you, always. Thank you very much, Zamir, for being yourself. Srilata, really, again, thank you so much for accepting to be with us today. And to all the participants, I really do hope that at the end of this, you will leave with many more questions, much more curiosity, and will reach out to us. Certainly, people who are deafblind in our country have not had the easiest start. We are a barrier-filled nation, and yet people with spirit like Zamir, like Pradeep, are able to reach where they are able to reach. And they are able to do this because of us, because of a community. This nation has been known for the way we stand up and we answer, we reach out and we support. And this is our call to you. Please get more involved. Please get more aware. Please ask more the right questions. Thank you again. And with this, and again, a very, very big thank you, Vidya Sagar, for your always being there to give us, to be like the backbone of everything that we do.